Dr. Andreas Krieg, who's an associate professor in security studies at King's College London. Thank you for being here. So let's talk about this deal that we are being told by both sides is nearly done. What are the delicate manoeuvres that would have had to take place under the aegis of Qatar to get to this stage?
No, this has been going on for weeks and weeks, actually. So we were very close to a deal just before the ground invasion happened a couple of weeks ago. But the Israeli government had a different viewpoint to the intelligence services in Israel. So we always think there are only three parties, as in there's Hamas and Israel on both sides, and the Qatar is mediating. But obviously Israel is not speaking with one voice. Hamas is not speaking with one voice. We're realizing the hostages are being held not just by Hamas, but an array and network of different factions that are somewhat loosely affiliated with Hamas.
Just tell me a little bit about that, because I think people do think that the hostages are being held by Hamas, whatever that means. You're saying it's more complex than that. It's not just Hamas. There are other factions, some of them holding some of the hostages. This isn't generally known, is it?
Well, I mean, the problem is here, the narrative has been that Hamas is a unitary actor. They're not. They are an intensely networked actor with different cells. And obviously, we've seen a lot of uprising happening on the 7th of October, where people crossed the border that never were supposed to cross the border, people taking and kidnapping people and civilians that weren't even part of the initial planning. So for Hamas to say we know where everyone is, it's a lie. They don't. And so that has really complicated the matter as well. At the same time,
So hang on a minute. So if whoever's representing Hamas is asked, right, we will do whatever you say, return the hostages, those who are still alive, you're saying they wouldn't be able to because some of them don't know where some of them are.
No, I think they know now, but they didn't know a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
So I think the process has been taking note of who is where and who can be actually released. And then there comes the logistical question in play. So while a couple of weeks ago, strategically, Hamas was not willing, and Israel, the Israeli government particularly, wasn't willing to make any concessions whatsoever because they wanted the ground invasion to happen. We're now at a point where strategically Israel is willing to make concessions. They are under pressure. They're realizing there is no military solution to getting these people back, so we need to try diplomacy. So both sides want to talk, both sides want to make concessions, and now we're at a logistical kind of stumbling block, where logistically speaking, how do you get them freed amid ongoing operations? So the push was always by Hamas and by the Qataris to say, look, you need to give us a humanitarian pause, as they say, not a ceasefire, to allow logistically these people to actually get out. And now the Hamas is saying we don't want drones and any aircraft from the Israelis to fly over the area while people get released, because otherwise we'll give away our positions, and that will give it a military advantage to the IDF.
Explain why it's Qatar that are the architects of this.
Now, Qatar has for years been a mediator in the region between state and non-state actors. Qatar is a teeny tiny country, 350,000 people, extremely rich, but in a very insecure environment as well. So they want to be relevant, right? And their way of staying relevant is building networks and relationship with all kinds of actors, kind of being the Switzerland of the Middle East. That's how they presented themselves. And the Americans said in 2012, when Haniyeh and Mashal were supposed to leave Syria, potentially going to Iran, saying, well, let's keep these two under supervision and monitoring in a place that we trust and that we know, and that was Qatar. So the US said, please, can you take them on? And the Qataris said yes, in the same way that the Qataris were hosting the Taliban on US supervision for a couple of years.
And what is the Qatari relationship with Hamas, would you say?
Now, again, it's very difficult to say what is Hamas. They're a different personal relationship with different actors, right? There's some political leaders who are in Lebanon, two of them are in Qatar, but Haniyeh and even Khalid Mashal are completely different people and completely different sort of game that they're playing. Now, the Qataris have seen this as a very pragmatic relationship. It has, if you look at Qatar as a small country, it has really inflated its position, right? It's an oversized role it's playing with British government, French government, the Americans. Everyone is talking, everyone's flying to Qatar, CIA, Mossad, everyone's been there. The Iranians going to Qatar as well. So that role they're willing to play, and they're very pragmatic in doing that. And they know they need to have these channels, these networks in order to do this. So the Qataris, in that respect, they're doing it for their own national interest, but also at the same time, they believe in dialogue. And the only way we're going to get out of this crisis is through dialogue and engagement. And that's why I'm quite hopeful that this is a first stepping stone of saying, let's build some trust, let's try to engage, and let's build up from that into something potentially much bigger.
Can you see, I mean, military strategy is your speciality. Can you see an end to these hostilities? Can you see an end to this fighting, this war?
Well, the problem is, again, as Nora was saying before, the problem is the Israelis don't have a strategy, right? They don't have an end game, and you don't go into a war without knowing what you want to achieve. So that remains the big problem. I hope the biggest obstacle for a solution to this conflict are radicals on both sides, fundamentalists on both sides. So as much as Hamas needs to go, I think we also need the fundamentalists on the Israeli side to go. If moderate voices were sitting around the table, Ehud Barak, Ehud Olmert, these are people who've been around, who've been in the media saying, there is a way to advance a two-state solution. If we get to this point, if we have a political way out of this, and we need to build towards this, there is a way to get out of this quagmire. But the military solution only by saying we're going to be stuck here and we're going to fight block by block, house by house, is not only going to put lives at risk of Palestinian lives, but also Israeli lives at risk. So we need to find an avenue, kind of an off-ramp out of this quagmire into a political solution.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much for coming in. This is what's coming up after the break. Police are being criticised.